Tim Donald, what one thing do you wish you'd have known 10 years ago?
So this was actually a really interesting thing to think about because it sort of made me reflect a little bit. But I think that the thing I wish I had known was probably not to chase seniority really more than anything else. I think when I first started out, I had it in my head that I wanted to become creative director as soon as possible. It was kind of, I came into it sort of with this race to the top mentality where I just needed to get to that top role because that was like the coveted thing as a creative. But what you don't realize and what I think you find out over time is that as you get more senior, you actually become a bit more removed from the day-to-day work, the creative work that you actually got in the first place to do, because you have to start thinking broader. You have to start looking at the bigger picture stuff, and you can't get into the day-to-day. And so I wouldn't be in a hurry to remove myself from the thing that I enjoyed the most, if you know what I mean. And it's something that you think you need to you do it when you're ready. There's no kind of time frame or putting that pressure on yourself that you've got to get to that position by a certain time. It's just not valuable.
There is always someone, isn't there? When you start your career, there's always someone who's just been announced in the job that you always thought you wanted at another agency or another company at the age of like 24, and you're like, how the hell have they managed that? I remember I've forgotten the guy's name, Adam somebody. He was chief exec of Royal Mail when he was about 34. Then went on to be chief exec of the FA or chairman or something, and before he was 45. You're like, most people are still getting drunk and pissing in the back of behind a pub at that sort of age, and he's running
Yeah,
multi-billion-pound companies. So you do sometimes get into that and go, right, oh well, they've done that, so I want to see if I can get there quicker,
yeah,
or just, and it
yeah,
becomes the thing. But actually, you can quite quickly get away from the parts of the job that you actually love.
yeah, absolutely. And obviously, there are some people who are incredibly talented and into those roles really quickly because they're great at what they do. But I think even in that position, you miss out on a lot of more junior roles when you haven't got the pressure and responsibility, and you can experiment and
Mm-hmm.
explore more, and you can get really, really focused on developing like one or two ideas at a time. Like you miss out on all that, which is just such valuable experience that when you actually get to a CD role, having done all that, it becomes so it's much more useful than just going straight into it.
So now, in your role, which is chief creative officer, have I got that right? Yeah, chief
Yes, yeah, yeah,
creative
that's right.
officer at Snake. We'll talk about that in a minute. How do you
Mhm.
manage to manage that sort of tension between doing the job that you have and also maybe keeping your hand in on some of the stuff that you really, really enjoy doing? Do you manage to get to do a little bit of both, or do you have to do that in your own time?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately here, because it's quite a small internal team, it's still very hands-on and still very collaborative in the way that we work. If it was a much bigger place, obviously you've got more to manage, more people, more things going on. Like we have a lot of stuff going on, but because we do so much in-house, it does mean that I may be not doing the actual doing and producing of the work, but I'm definitely involved in the creative process from the beginning to the end. Um, so that I mean that's one of the reasons why I came to Sneak in the first place and why I love being here is because there is that approach and it's not so like I haven't become so managerial that I'm too detached from what's going on.
Hey up and welcome to the Strategy Sessions. My name is Andy Jarvis. I'm the host of the show and the Chief Strategy Officer at Eximo Marketing. Thank you for tuning in today. It means a lot to me and the team behind the Strategy Sessions. Before we go on with the guest, can I ask you to do two things for me? One, please interact with this episode. If you like it, if you hate it, I'd love you to leave a review and just let me know a few things about it. If you want to send it to me directly, my email address is in the show notes, so please do just fire me a message. Love to hear what you think. But interacting with the episode does help more people find it, so it really does help. So thank you for that. The second thing I'd like to say is send it to a friend. Is there someone you drop a WhatsApp to or an iMessage to and be like, yeah, I've heard this episode, you want to have a listen to this person? It's great. Honestly, it's a great way to help people discover things. So please do interact with the episode or share it with a friend if you've enjoyed it. And that's about it, really. Let's get on with the show and get back to the guest interview. So, Tim, we've already discovered you are Chief Creative Officer at Sneak. Tell us a little bit about Sneak for those who don't know the brand.
So Sneak is well, it is now is a functional drinks brand. So we started in 2018 as a purely an energy brand, and it was founded by two guys, Will and Johnny, who basically saw a bit of an opportunity in the market. Back in 2018, there were not many sugar-free energy drinks on the market. You had your sort of mainstays, Red Bull, Monster, um, but there weren't any real sugar-free variants at the time. And they wanted to make a better version of the energy drinks that were available, and they chose a different format, which is the powder that you mix with water. For a number of reasons, you can have a more complicated formula, and it's better value for money ultimately. Um, and also they wanted it to be targeted specifically at gamers. And at the time, I think as well, there weren't many brands that were specifically aimed at gamers. So you had some of the bigger brands that had probably a gaming strategy, but they were mass market products. They weren't for gamers specifically. So that was the kind of proposition. It was gaming energy, and it was launched very social first with streamers and building that community. Um, but over time, that's kind of expanded to where we are now, which is more of a broad functional drinks brand. So we have the energy product, we have a canned energy RTD, we have a hydration product, we have a meal replacement product. So it's really broadened out, but it's still with the same principles that we want to make better versions of what's currently available.
Just for those listening who aren't in the drink sector, RTD is a
Ready to drink, yeah, can.
and you now
Just get caught
the
up in the jargon.
RTD. So we'll stick with it. The RTD is now in all sorts of retail outlets as well, isn't it? So you've moved from direct to
Yeah.
consumer into retail now.
Yeah, and that's been a really interesting and challenging journey, really. We started that at the beginning of 2024, and obviously the canned energy retail market is very long-standing, very saturated now. Loads of brands that have been around for a while, and it's a very noisy category as well. Everyone's kind of trying to get your attention. It's very visually very noisy as well. So coming into that market as a new brand is very difficult to cut through and to get people's attention. But I think we started in the right way, building it up gradually from the northwest where we're based in Manchester, starting in convenience, and not trying to jump too far ahead before we were ready, really. So we've been steadily building up our distribution over the last 18 or so months, and it started and it's working. And in the places where we are available, we often find that we're third or fourth place in terms of rate of sale behind the likes of Red Bull and Monster, which is amazing for us, and it just shows that the brand has got that traction and the ability to cut through where we need to.
So what I want to do is come back to the launch into retail shortly, but I want to talk a bit first about the design. You mentioned it's visually noisy as a category, and your brand is visually striking. So is that from its gaming heritage? Is that a sort of deliberate leaning into that so that you can stand out in, as you say, limited shelf space that you're taking now in retail?
Design's always been a really important part of the Sneak brand, really. I think the label designs of the tubs have always been designed with that kind of it's kind of a mashup between streetwear and gaming. I think was the original kind of look and feel of it. And because we've sort of had this drop culture that's part of the brand of limited edition product, it had this collectability to it that we've always really we've really leaned into, and it's really important to us that all of our products should feel collectible in some way. Like some of the Sneak community have got rooms and shelves dedicated to Sneak products, and they're not just the limited edition stuff. That's the core product as well, because we always go over and above on design. And obviously, we've got the bunny, the Sneak Bunny logo, which is something that people always remember, and is the consistent part of the brand. Is you always see the bunny logo. So I think with those things kind of combined and the attention to detail, like we've got a super talented design team in house that really passionate and put so much work into what we do, and I think that shows and it pays off when people see it on shelf.
So those distinctive brand assets that have been cultivated over time, are you now at a place where you can play with them a little bit? Because I know you do sort of. There's been some bespoke gaming stuff that you've done. You've done all sorts of bits with it. Does that having that asset give you something you can have fun with, even in a fun brand, something you can have more fun with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a bit of a funny journey since I joined Sneak 3 years ago. Like when I joined, it was really at that transition point between founder-led startup, and then the brand was acquired by True, a private equity firm. And when I came in, it was really transitioning from that startup to a scale-up business. But as part of that, there were no brand guidelines when I first joined. There was no, everything was kind of instinctive from the people that had been there since the beginning. And part of what I've been trying to do is along with Chantel, as our head of design, is try and bring some order to the brand without kind of killing the creativity that has existed in the brand since the beginning. And that's a really delicate balance sometimes. Um, but yeah, I think the bunny has been the consistent element, and we've always remixed and played around with how the bunny is represented. So with some of the limited edition stuff, it's always themed around something from pop culture, like we've done gaming related things, stuff from movies and TV, fantasy, horror, all that kind of thing. So we've remixed the brand loads and loads of times, but the bunny is always the central character, whether that's in a toy or on the packaging. So I think that's the thing that's always kept that integrity.
When you say horror, there was something that raised my eyebrow on the briefing notes I was sent, part of Tim's bio, from satanic cults to spoof dating shows. Now, I'm assuming that means something you've done for the brand rather than just what you do in your spare time. Or does it? Maybe it'd be more interesting if it is just what you do in your spare time.
I mean, I'm not going to go there right now, but yeah, it's the brand. Don't worry, I'm not into Satanism, but
That's
yeah,
ruined the
this is
second
what I
half of
mean
the
by
interview now,
remixing.
Tim. Ruined it.
um, yeah, it's what I was talking about in terms of drawing from pop culture. So to take a little bit of a step back, I think one of my personal beliefs is that as a gaming brand, I think what the mistake a lot of brands make is that they assume that it's quite a one-dimensional view of a gaming audience. I think in that if you're a gamer, that all you want to do is see and consume gaming content. I think quite early on, we decided that actually gamers are more multifaceted than that. So if you're into gaming, you're also probably into fantasy, sci-fi, anime, comic books. There's a whole world of cultural territories that sort of surround gaming that felt like really rich for us to play around with, rather than just laser focused on gaming and only really talking to maybe a subset of our overall consumer. So with that in mind, we always kind of dip in and out of things that are nerd culture, basically, is what we're talking about. Is things that are kind of on that nerdier end of the spectrum. Um, and it's from movies to films and games as well. So it's all things combined. So to get back to Satanism, that's where it was one of our Halloween drops, which it was all themed around kind of pop culture Satanism from movies and TV and that kind of thing. But part of what we do is try and push things about as far or even further than what other brands could do. So we had this idea really early on that we wanted to work with a real Satanist, like a real practicing Satanist, and get them to put a curse on one of their tubs. So the launch content that we made, we flew out to Colorado, which is where we found someone who was willing to do it
I
and
mean, I must say, I
filmed
am
them.
shocked, stunned, and indeed amazed that you had to go to America to find that, and a desert as well. Oh. But anyway, sorry. So you went to
Surprise, yeah, surprisingly hard to find someone who was actually willing to admit they were practicing Satanist and someone that would do something as stupid as this. But we filmed them doing this kind of ritual, putting a curse on one of the tubs, and then we sealed it in a wooden box, wrapped it in chains, and we offered it for free to a member of our community if they came into the office to collect it in person and to sign a disclaimer that if anything bad happened to them, it wasn't our fault. Um, and that was the whole theme of the campaign. We had a branded Ouija board, that was a piece of merchandise that went alongside the collection. So we always love to go really deep into whatever theme that we're exploring at the time. We go fully into it.
Just so we can go kind of end to end with this as well, have you had any sort of exorcist type moments where people involved in this have been dead or dying, and loads of people involved in the Exorcist met a rather untimely end, didn't they, or something like that? But yeah, has anyone met an untimely end? Has the consumer come back to you with horns or anything like that?
Fortunately, not yet. I say yet because we've still got plenty of other things to explore, but we are definitely like pushing it. So the last Halloween campaign that we did, we spent the night in a haunted prison um, with some drag queens, and that was we held a séance in the prison, and we were trying to find ghosts. But the ambition was to be the first brand to contact a ghost. So we spent the night in a haunted prison. We held a séance, and apparently the warden from that particular prison in Shrewsbury was not a very nice man, and actually died in his office. So we held the séance in the warden's office, and there was some pretty weird stuff that happened. Like I'm quite skeptical of this stuff, but there was definitely some banging noises and like it was quite intense.
Yeah. Well, listen. Where I wasn't going to go next, but where I am going to go is I want to know more about your creative process. I mean, is it alcohol fueled? Is it acid? Is it or is it just walking around in a bit of fresh air? How do these ideas come to you for Ouija boards and drag queens in prisons and seances?
There's not a process as such. I think it's just a kind of childhood of raised on B movies and and, and games myself. So I'm really into that stuff anyway. So I love like horror was one of like the things I loved as a kid growing up, and it's really that I think as a any kind of creative person, you're kind of a product of your experiences and all the things that you've absorbed over time. And what I was always told really early on was that you become a bit like a sponge, and everything that you're exposed to, you just absorb. And when you in a situation like that, you've got to come up with ideas. Like sometimes there's weird connections just happen from something you saw like 20 years ago, and you just have to be receptive to all the stuff that that's around you and sort of lean into your own experiences a little bit.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And Alex, we are. People sometimes say, "Oh, the idea came to me out of the blue," and it was like, "Yeah, but it took you 25 years for that idea to come to you out of the blue.
Yeah,
It was all that
it can do. Yeah.
experience and background." So cool. Okay.
Mm.
Well, look, going back to gaming, I in the summer, hold on, let me just get a big flex coming out here. I went to Cannes for the first time, and I interviewed a couple of people while I was there. One of them was Jonathan Stringfield, who's the VP globally for Microsoft's gaming division, Microsoft Activision, for their advertising products. And we talked a lot in that interview about gamers. 3.4 billion people worldwide are gaming on a regular basis. This kind of myth that gamers are just sort of basement pizza eaters who never go outside, male, heavy, young, is just false in a gaming world. I do sense though when you're talking about gamers, you are talking almost of the stereotypical gamer, that sort of young, sort of male solo gamer, as opposed to someone playing, Happy Fish or whatever it is on the phone. So, how do you define a gamer within Sneak?
Yeah, I don't know if it's. I don't think if we are necessarily talking to the stereotypical gamer. I think, as I said before, we try and take a bit more of a well-rounded view of what gamers actually are, and even the term gamer is something that not everyone identifies with. So there's actually quite a big scale between someone who's a casual gamer that just kind of plays on the weekends or an hour here and there when they've got time, to someone that is competitive gaming, esports, and that kind of thing. There's a big gulf in between that of people's engagement with games. And mobile games, like you say, it's it's not quite as simple as just going you're either a gamer or you're not. I think really early on, we did some brand research just to find out who our consumers actually were, and it was really surprising to us, having sort of launched as a gaming brand. I think in the data we had a couple of years ago, we actually found that only about 50% of our consumers played games at all, and a smaller percentage of that 50% would actually self-identify as a gamer. So I look at it myself, and I play games, but I wouldn't call myself a gamer. I don't identify as a gamer in the traditional sense of how people think of gamers. And I've always kind of kept that in mind when we're doing what we're doing, not to be too narrow in how we're looking at the traits of a gamer. So we talk about our audience in terms of the spectrum between nerd culture and popular culture. So if you picture a Venn diagram, at one end of the spectrum, you've got the most populist culture, and then on the other end is the super nerdy stuff. And what you've been seeing over time is that there's a lot of quite nerd things that were previously quite nerdy that are sort of started to permeate into popular culture. And you look at things like Dungeons and Dragons, for example, um, being pushed
Even
into mainstream
Pokemon, for
culture.
example. Pokemon was
Yeah,
a
Pokemon.
very nerdy thing when I was a kid. That's a long time ago, but post me being a kid, it was a bit nerdy and a bit geeky to play Pokemon, and then
Yeah.
everyone's playing Pokemon. Adults running around park trying to find them, and
Yeah.
what's changed? So yeah, that crossover does happen, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the sweet spot for us was that in that middle territory where we had a kind of not even a legacy consumer, but the consumer that we have that's been with us from the beginning, let's say, who are probably skew slightly more on the nerdier end of the spectrum. Um, but there's also other people that are sort of somewhere in the middle. So it allowed us to sort of play around in a territory where we weren't switching it up and being a different brand that the people that been with us since the beginning didn't recognize anymore. But it was a bit more accessible to a more casual audience, I suppose. We're never going to be a fully mainstream brand. We'll never be over that other end of the like popular culture spectrum. We don't want to be necessarily, but there's a need, particularly when you start to look at the consumer that's picking us up in a retail context. There was a need to broaden that brand out a little bit, make it a bit more accessible, and just more relatable to that sort of slightly more casual audience.
You're in retail. You're in WH Smith's travel retail. You're in supermarkets. You're in convenience stores, where your customer in these places is fundamentally different to somebody who is buying you direct to consumer online, waiting days, whatever it was for it to show up. So, are you under pressure from retailers who are now your customer to, modify, grow up a little, conservative, tone it down? We don't want to be stocking people who are doing Satan worshipping stuff. Can we just, enough of, that shit's all nice 5 years ago, but can you just be a little bit more sensible now? Because actually, you're being picked up by Sally, who's 49, who's just tired on her way to another meeting. You're being picked up by Derek, who's 60, because his kid's there and he doesn't want to be seen certain way. So can you just, do you get that pressure from your customers? Because effectively, retail is a big customer for you now.
It is, and fortunately, we've never had that. We've never had any pressure to change who we are as a brand. In fact, it's been a real selling point for us. It's people like the fact that we're not like other brands and that we have this kind of cult following that's been built for our D2C brand. So that's what they want to see more of in their stores. Really, is having this kind of disruptor come into the space and do things differently. So it's actually been a great strength of ours getting into those spaces rather than something that's counted against us.
So let me ask the question the other way around then. Do you feel more pressure to be even wackier then? Landing in that sweet spot between, you've got two very different customer groups now. So do you sort of feel like, oh, we need to do something outrageous, something interesting, to kind of keep that angle and keep that together? Do you feel that competing pressure, or is it really easy just to go, right, no, this is our space, we land here, and that's really easy for us to do?
I think that pressure is entirely self-inflicted for us, to be honest, because we've done some pretty crazy stuff in the past. The pressure comes from us just wanting to keep that momentum and outdo the thing that we did last time. So it's not, I don't think it's as much of a trying to out crazy our competitors. It's trying to make sure that we're staying true to who we are. And we've always been like that as a brand. It's not performative in any way. Going into the energy space, like I said, which is all really noisy and extreme, and you've got Red Bull kind of doing skydives from space and all this kind of stuff. Um, we're not going into there going, how can we compete and do crazier stuff than Red Bull? We're just, how can we show ourselves as a brand in those spaces? Because that's the biggest challenge for us is like from a D2C perspective, you've got a lot more space to show brand personality. When you're in, particularly in like in independent retailers, you have no real control how that product shows up in an independent retailer. You don't have POS space necessarily, so all you've really got to communicate the brand is on the pack, and that's the big challenge for us, is how do we keep that thread of brand through to every touch point, and it becomes more and more challenging in spaces where you don't have anything more than the pack.
The big lever in retail that retailers love to pull is promotions. We know retailers love working with brands and going, that's fantastic. You've got X amount of shelf space, which is usually under pressure, but you've got this shelf space. But if you want to run a promotion, you get the bid end, you get this, you get more space, but you've got to hammer the price as well. And marketing science will tell you that if you keep hammering your price, you're going to affect your brand at some point. So how do you deal with that tolerance of tension? Of retailers, I'm sure, asking you for price reductions constantly and trying to keep the value in the brand?
Obviously, there's some circumstances where it's quite promotion driven, and the promotions might be part of the offering of being in that particular retail space. It's not something that we are strictly against, but pricing's like a pretty crazy thing overall, because it's not just about retailers wanting to discount. It's about how consumers are viewing price as well, compared to what's going on in the rest of the market. So um, when you've got brands like Monster and Red Bull, who are huge brands who can sell their product for cheaper, we're often more expensive in some shops that you go into, because obviously as a much smaller brand, we can't match that. And once you start getting on a price competition, it's one that we can't win.
Although, as I did some work, another name dropping moment. Sorry, I did some work with Seth Godin, and he describes the scary thing about getting into price competitions. He says the problem is it's a race to the bottom, and the scary thing is you might win it, and that becomes a different problem for you. It's like, oh yes,
yeah, it's definitely something you don't want to win. So for us, it's more about how we demonstrate the value of the product. So we our RTD is not just a standard energy drink. When you look at a formula side by side with like the likes of Red Bull and Monster, there's actually more benefit from our product than there is from theirs. So we have the standard things you would expect from an energy drink: B vitamins, caffeine, but we also have an ingredient called brainberry in there, which is really exciting. It's like a berry extract that's got some great clinical data on how it improves cognitive function. And we also got prebiotic fiber in there as well. So there's this gut-brain axis thing going on in there with the connection between gut health and brain health. So it side by side, we have the better product, I would say.
The question, sorry, I had, sorry to jump in. Does that matter to consumers? And the reason I ask is many years ago, probably a decade ago now, there's a very, very popular energy brand in Northern Ireland. At the time, it was outselling Red Bull. I don't know if it still is, 10 years ago. And the agency I was at, we pitched to them. And they'd said in some of their documentation that it was the number one product because it was, the brand was great. It was the quality of the product was better than Red Bull's. It was this, and this, and this. And it just didn't smell right to me. So we went out and stood in a couple of retail outlets and talked to your customers is my big thing. Stood in, chatted to some kids, and it was really noticeable that actually the bulk of the buyers, no matter where we went and when we're quite young. And when we asked them, said, what did you buy that for? And it's like, it's 99 pence. And it's like, well, Red Bull's £2.50. I don't have that. I'm buying this because it's £1. And everywhere we went, all the research that we did, and we did a bit more research after that as well, it was all price, 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 price. We didn't win that because I stupidly, in my genius, decided that the thing to do in the pitch was to tell them they were wrong and tell them that actually all anyone cared about was price. So that's what we should focus on. Didn't win the work. But it was really interesting how in their bubble, all they thought people cared about was the quality of the product and the logo. And when you got out of their bubble, all the customers were telling us was price was the only thing that mattered. So does that quality of the drink, all those bits, because there's another brand, Tenzing, I think is it called, named after Sherpa Tenzing. They're an energy. They talk about, natural products and this and natural this, natural that. Does it matter? People are going, yeah, actually, I want an energy drink. Or is it an energy drink? Because I'm knackered. And therefore, just give me the thing with the caffeine.
It's both. It's both. I think it'd be stupid to ignore the fact that it's very price driven. Energy, particularly in a retail context, is quite need driven. Very like there's hardly any times that you go into a shop and buy an energy drink that you're going to have later on. It's like I feel tired, I need something to pick me up, and it's very need driven. So there's a certain consumer that doesn't care, that they just want something that is going to address that need in that moment, and they're not loyal to any particular brand. They'll just get what's cheapest. That customer, you're never going to win that customer unless you're the cheapest. So there's no point in trying to convince that particular consumer to trade up because that's not what they're looking for, and you'll never win that. So it's about addressing the people that do care about that. And I think particularly what you're seeing more and more of now with the younger consumer is that they are very health focused and are looking for things that have additional benefits and are willing to pay more for things that have perceived benefit, greater benefit. And that's why you're seeing the rise of more functional drinks products on the side of like prebiotic sodas, kombucha. Like that whole end of the market is really growing, and it's generally more expensive by quite a lot than other drinks um, in the category. So
In retail, do you consider those drinks, the kombuchas and the likes, as competitors? Because in a D2C space, they were probably never a competitor. But when you get into retail, and especially in travel retail, where their fridge space is really tight, so if they're going to take on, we need 4 lines of a new category, something's got to go. So all of a sudden, they might not be consumer competitive to you, but they are customer competitive to you. So do you look at that as well? Is that all part of your how do we make our brand show up so it's strong enough to not be the one that gets bumped?
yeah, we absolutely look at it. We don't consider the more functional soft drink end of it a direct competitor, but it's all the same category. And I think the piece of brand strategy work we've just done recently is looking at the functional drinks category as a whole. And I think it's sometimes quite easy to think of energy and functional drinks as two separate things, but it's one category. Energy drinks are a functional drink after all, but they're the sort of biggest chunk of that market. So it's easy for us to go, our competitor is Monster, but actually there's sort of I love a Venn diagram, but it's the if you look at energy function as a spectrum, there's actually a sort of a new space that's emerging in the middle, which is kind of energy plus. And one of the brands that's kind of come out that's doing that is James Smith's brand New Tonic. I don't know if you know that. And they sort of really at its heart it's an energy drink, but they sort of market that as a productivity drink because it has additional benefits above just caffeine. It's not just a I'm tired, I need a hit. It's around concentration, focus, cognitive, all that kind of stuff. So there is this sort of middle category opening up that is not just a hit of energy, and it's not sort of some of the more nebulous areas, the wellness drinks kind of area, which is I don't fully know, like CBD, for example. That's people still don't really fully know what CBD does, and whether they should have it or not. So there's a little bit of like a muddiness to that end of the spectrum. But that middle ground is really interesting, and I think that's where we start to occupy that space where people will, if we do it right, people will not necessarily just bundle us in with Monster C4, all that kind of territory.
Let's take a step back a little bit further then. So, as a brand, you mentioned that you were bought by private equity, and therefore you're moving from startup to scale up. is it just the obvious move, therefore, to go, okay, we're going into retail? What were the sort of considerations around that discussion and those decisions that were taken? Because it's not as straightforward as in, oh, we've got a brand, we've got a community, let's just whack it somewhere else to sell it. It's quite different, isn't it?
It's very different, yeah. And I think the original consensus was that retail wasn't the right opportunity. I think right the way back when the brand was first acquired, particularly because of how difficult it is for a new brand coming into the energy market in particular. As I said, very saturated, very noisy, and you've got some very big mainstay brands in there that have got like 90% market share or like or 90% brand awareness, where they've been around for so long that they're just like a default choice for most people, and that's really hard to break through that and even kind of get on the same level as that. So I think initially the consensus was that actually retail's not where we should be focusing. Let's grow the D2C side of the business. But then over time, you sort of hit a challenge where it's a format challenge for us, really, because powdered energy still now isn't what people think about when they think of energy drinks. It's far more sports nutrition, pre-workout space where the familiarity is. So the powdered energy category in the UK is still quite new and quite small. And it's not really an entry level product as well. What you find is that the consumer that switches to an energy powder is probably someone who's drunk a lot of energy drinks in the past and wants a little bit more from it, and wants to have the powder, control how strong they have it, and mixed flavors, which is what we find a lot of people doing with Sneak. But it's not your immediate, I'm going to start drinking energy drinks and I'm going to go straight into a powder product. So there's a little bit of a format challenge of how you can scale up that particular product, um, which is where the can comes in um, as the bigger opportunity, because the market is it's magnitudes bigger for canned energy than it is for powdered energy. Um, and that was really what was driving the decision to actually let's push this out and make it go over.
Moving down that line into retail, and so you've got design challenges coming out of your different places, but you've also got a community of people who you've built over the years of the brand. You've got a Discord community and a Facebook community. Now, at the risk of sounding like a high court judge, could you explain what a Discord community is there, please, Tim?
So Discord is it's a really interesting place. So it was born out of the gaming community again, and it's a social network, and it's mostly gamers or people who are into gaming that use it, because it's not quite as user friendly as some of the more kind of mass market social networks. But you have a private server basically, which you set up and invite people to. So it's not you have to have your own sort of server set up.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where our most hardcore fans are, really, the Sneak servers. But I think we're up to about 16,000 people on the server,
That's incredible.
which is yeah, it's crazy for a brand our age to have that kind of size of it. But I think that's testament to how the brand was launched in a very community first way, and it's not just that people are on there just purely talking about the brand. It's just become a bit of a space where like-minded people have kind of come together and built that community around the brand, and it's largely happened organically as well. So we have some great community management. Like the guys here are really engaged with people on there, and it's not something where we've just kind of set it up and left it, and whatever happens happens. It's managed, and we do kind of try to grow it, but it's not been it's kind of happened organically at the same time.
So I love talking about tension. I'm not trying to pick fights that don't exist, but as you go from this relatively niche gaming focused brand with a Discord community and a bit of a Facebook group into this mass market, have you noticed any rising kind of, you wouldn't be the first brand where people are like, oh yeah, but they're not for us anymore, or they've kind of, the Northern Irish have a lovely phrase, they've lost the run of themselves. Basically, you've just moved away from what you were. Do you find, is that a tension that you have to be really careful how you manage, or have you managed to take the community with you on this journey into kind of more mass market sales?
Honestly, we thought we might get quite a lot of that, like Sneak selling out and going mainstream. We thought we would get some kind of feedback like that. But honestly, it's been really supportive from the community. The people that are super into Sneak love seeing it out in the world. Um, there's a there's often like people sharing pictures on Facebook and Discord of like Sneak in the wild when they've gone into a shop and seen Sneak on the shelves. It's like an exciting thing, which is great because it's like they share the excitement that we have of being out in shops and being more available to people. So it's not quite as like it's not gatekeep to in the way that you would expect it or almost anticipate it to be, which is really good. Um, and people just love seeing it out in the world or spotting someone else that's got some Sneak merch on or something like that. It's like a bit of a unspoken thing that people just love to see.
Amazing stuff. Well, look, I want to have a bit of a change of gear. I want to pull the handbrake up, spin the wheel round, get the tyres burning, and just point off in a different direction and talk just a little bit about you briefly before we wrap, because you've got a really interesting background. You've been agency side and your brand side now, so you've had a foot in both camps. And I had a guy on last season, James Hayhurst, who runs the Magic Source course, which is how to get better work between agencies and clients. Because there's often tension there. Back to talking about tension again. In your experience of being agency and client side, what is that magic sauce that makes great relationships between agencies and clients?
So it's a very interesting question, and it was really an eye opener for me coming into brand side because it is such a different experience of how like ultimately you're doing the same thing. You're using creativity for a brand, and you're what we do in house isn't so dissimilar from what an agency would do, but you're far in house. You're far more connected to the impact of the work that you do and how it relates to the business challenges and how you can uh, the other way around as well, how a business challenge can come up that then needs to be addressed using creativity. Whereas I think on an agency side, although the brief is driven by a business problem, once you've delivered that work, you've sort of disconnected from it then, and you're on to your next brief. And I don't think you ever really know how much impact that's had, unless it's a retained client that you work with year on year and you get to see that impact. But I think retainers are becoming less and less, certainly for smaller agencies. Um, there's that sort of disconnection between the impact of the work. Like whenever we put anything out now, I can see pretty much in real time in the community how well that's gone down. And that's quite an uncomfortable thing sometimes to get that instantaneous feedback. But it's also super interesting to like, I'm in the Discord, I'm in the Facebook group, I'm looking at what people are saying, and you can listen too much to that and that cloud your judgment sometimes. But it's that connection to the impact that the work that you do has. So I think really it's given me a greater appreciation of when I've pitched ideas to clients, like what they're looking for, because I'm now in a position where I have agencies pitching to me sometimes, and that's a surreal experience because then I understand. I see their work in a different light, and I see some of the mistakes that I must have made on when I was on the agency side. Um, and I really struggle now to find an agency that understands our brand. Um, so I think it probably doesn't answer your question, but it's from a personal experience. I think anyone in an agency should really spend some time to get to know what is going on with that particular client, what challenges they've had on a day to day, spend more time understanding the brand before trying to solve the problem. Um, and this is a difficult thing to do because obviously time is not always on the side for stuff like this, but it's that mutual understanding of both sides of the table that will ultimately make work better.
Yeah, to me, it all starts with asking better questions.
Yeah,
And asking more
great.
questions as well. You'd be amazed sometimes, even if the questions aren't great, if you ask more of them. A volume just does help because people start
Yeah.
talking and start telling you
Hmm.
things, and you're like, oh, all right, oh, got it. And it's amazing what you learn when you start
Yeah.
asking more questions. So, look, in terms of asking questions, I've got one more left to ask you, Tim, and that is, what book or podcast or resource would you recommend people check out that might make them better at their job?
So the one book that I love and I tell everyone about, and it's a bit it sounds quite pretentious, and it is, to be honest, a little bit pretentious. But it's Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act: A Way of Being, and I think this is it's one of those books that comes up a lot with people in a creative field, because it is one of the things I like about it is the way he frames creativity is about process, not output. And I think definitely, having been agency side, you there's a trap of falling into execution before really fully developing the idea. You're almost approaching a execution first. Like, you already know it's going to be a TV ad, for example. So then you sort of having to fit an idea to an execution. Whereas the way that Rick Rubin talks about creativity is it's sort of removed from the output. It's process over outcome is what he talks about. Um, and I think the course I went to at uni was quite an unusual advertising course, really. It's creative advertising at Leeds Arts University. And a lot of the other core advertising courses were quite vocational in how they were set up. It was by the end of it, you'll have a book and then you can go to an agency and get a job. But for the first like year of that course, we didn't even make ads necessarily. It was all about creative thinking. I remember at the time being like, how is this helping me? But it's actually been like super, super useful, because earlier on when you're asking about creative process, it's probably a lot of things that I absorbed during that I'm not even aware of about how you actually come up with ideas. And that's what the book is about, basically.
Yeah. It seems like Leeds Creative Advertising University, or whatever it was called, has gone for the Mr. Miyagi approach to teaching you advertising.
Yeah,
You've been painting the fence
pretty much.
and waxing the car and doing all dropping your coat and all that sort of stuff
Yeah,
before you get into the ring. So no, I love
yeah,
it. I love it.
absolutely.
Perfect. Well, look, Tim, tell us, how do people get in touch with you if they want to? You probably have agencies trying to pitch you now, going, "We understand gaming culture," but how do people find you? Is it LinkedIn? Is that the best place, or Discord?
Yeah, LinkedIn. That's a good place. So yeah, feel free to get in touch on there.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Tim. Talk to you soon, mate.
Thank you. Cheers, Andy.